Shlomo Carlebach used to tell a story. He would go all the time to Eretz Yisrael. He would meet tons and tons of people, different kinds of Jews. People would come to speak to him. And one time, a father brought his son, who already for years had not been religious at all, no connection to Yiddishkeit, no connection to Yahadus, to Judaism, nothing. In fact, his hatred for Judaism had grown so incredibly strong that he refused to walk into the house that he had been brought up in, his parents' house, because right there when he walked into the house, hanging on the wall was a picture of his great-great-great-grandfather. It was a Jew back in Poland, the long beard, the pez, big black yarmulke, long frock. And he was so ashamed that he descends from what he assumed were terrible fools and backward, archaic people. He couldn't even bear the thought of walking into his house all the while that he had to look at that picture. Couldn't handle it. He demanded that his parents take the picture down. Obviously, they would hear of no such thing. It's their Zayd, it's their grandfather. But he wouldn't walk into the home at all. So the father brought this person to Shlomo, try to speak a little bit to him, help him work out his issues. What are the blockages that are holding him back? And he couldn't get through, at all. He wouldn't hear it. He didn't want to hear anything. Okay, a few years pass. And in the early 70s, Shlomo goes back to Eretz Yisrael on a trip, and he's doing some kind of concert somewhere in one of the yeshuvim. And a Jew bounds over to him, huge smile on his face, also payas, yarmulke, and he looks at Shlomo with shining eyes. He says, "Do you remember me?" He's looking at him. He says, "I'm so sorry. I don't think I've ever met you in my life." He says, "Don't you remember one time, a couple of years back, there was a father who brought his son who couldn't bear to walk into the house all the while that his religious grandfather's picture was on the wall?" He said, "Yeah, it's a strange story." He says, "That's me. That was me." Like a 180, a complete transformation. So obviously there's a story here. So Shlomo says, "Now tell me, what happened in your life since we've last spoken?" He tells him, "Listen, the 67 war," he says, "I was called up, I was enlisted into the Tzahal, and I was a tankist. I was driving a tank. We were down in Sinai, the Sinai desert, and all of a sudden, from behind, it was clear that we were being pursued by an Egyptian tank. Mamish hot on our trail. So obviously, he says, we're trying to run away, we're trying to, get to safety, a place where we're protected, a place where we had other positions behind a mountain, or a range of mountains. And obviously, he says the closest point, between one place and another is a straight line. So they floor it, and he's pedal to the metal, and the tank is behind him, coming into range, shooting range, and they're driving as fast as a tank could possibly go, in a straight line to the mountain range where they need to get. And all of a sudden, he tells Shlomo, all of a sudden he's looking, because he's driving the tank, all of a sudden he sees, standing right in his way, is an Orthodox Jew. It's an old man with bearded payas, with a talis and tefillin, and he's davening shachris in the middle of the Sinai desert, like in the middle of an active war zone. And he thought to himself, as he's getting closer and closer, he's driving this tank as fast as the tank could possibly drive. He said, he tells Shlomo, he says that my first thought was to just run them over. Like, how stupid can you get? He says, I always knew these Jews were stupid, like these religious people. He's standing in a battlefield, in the middle of the desert, talis and tefillin. Like, was he out of his mind? What's he thinking? But then he says, Sach HaKol, he says, I'm fighting on behalf of the Jewish state. He's not going to run over another Jew. So he pulls the tank around this person, last minute, turns the I don't know if it's a steering wheel or whatever you have in a tank, he turns it hard pan to the left, and he swerves around this person. And he carries on, even though he lost a second or two, which is crucial, obviously. He's being pursued by an Egyptian tank. And as he carries on for another 30, 40 seconds, all of a sudden there's a tremendous explosion. He looks in the rearview mirror, the equivalent, and he turns around to see what happened. And it's clear to him that the Egyptian tank was not as kind to that Orthodox Jew. Carried on in a direct line, and it just so happened to be where that Jew was standing was a mine. And the Egyptian tank was completely decimated, destroyed. A crazy thing, the craziest thing in the world. He said, when I came home after the war, he said, I was so shaken by my experiences that even though I hadn't been in my parents' house for years because of that picture on the wall, he said, I had to go home to my Abba, my Ima. So he says, you'll never believe it, Shlomo. He says, I walked into the house, and for the first time in many years, I took a look at that picture, hanging right by the door when you walk in. And he said, that face of my great-great-grandfather, that was the face of that Jew in the Sinai desert. Talis and tefillin. That was my Zayda. Who came back to save me, to wink at me a little bit. Save my life. So this is Gam Ki Eilech B'Geit Salmavis, Even in the valley of the shadow of death, Lo Irara Ki Ati Imadi. In those moments, mortal moments, life or death, God becomes very, very real. And God has all kinds of messengers, all kinds of angels.